Cup Series race. Here are your hosts, Kevin Batstone, NASCAR Sky, and Jeff Davis.
Welcome back, NASCAR Nation, to another great episode of Mash the Gas podcast. I'm Jeff Davis, and joining me shortly, Kevin Batstone and Miss NASCAR Sky. It's a little bit of a late one. I know a lot of us were up past midnight and ran into Monday morning, but we are here to cover the Cracker Barrel 400 from Nashville Speedway. And Sky, who mashed the gas this Sunday into Monday morning?
Well, you got to give it to the guy who started first, immediately went to the back, and then ended up winning the race. I mean, Denny Hamlin is so talented. He shows how nothing in the offseason, with the lawsuit, nothing about his age or anything else that's going on can stop him. I mean, he is just so incredibly talented. That's win number 62, which puts him 10th all time on the wins list, one win behind good old Kyle Busch. So I'm excited to see where he takes it the rest of the season. I mean, he's probably one of the only guys that's really going to give the 45 a run for his money. So Denny Hamlin mashed it the hardest.
I would have to agree. He cut that deficit on Tyler Reddick down to 97 points. He's led 756 laps on the season with 7 top 5s and 9 top 10s. It's consistency that's going to pay off for Denny. That when he jumped that restart there, Jeff, I was like, what is Denny doing? This is like a kind of a rookie move. It kind of reminded me of a time that happened at Richmond and didn't get called. So obvious, he owned it. He's like, yeah, that was on me. Goes to the back. I mean, fortunate for him, started early in the race. If that had happened in stage 3, it might have been a different story. But was able to bounce back, go up there, lead laps, hold off his JGR teammates. I would say a nod to JGR too with a 1-2-3 finish.
That was an incredible finish, but like you said, Denny Hamlin, it was way obvious. I don't know how he made that mistake of jumping at, the restart zone. I was like, that was not just by a few feet or anything. That looked more like 15 yards he jumped it. But that just shows how much talent he has, like you said, to be able to start at the rear of the field, and we've seen him do it many times. Whether it's a penalty or not, go all the way to the end and march back through the front. And by the end of the race, he's getting that checker flag from the stands. So yeah, Denny Hamlin, he just could not be beat last night. And I really thought Christopher Bell was going to pull it off. He showed a lot of momentum there, and I was kind of rooting for the 20s. I think that's who I picked last week to win. But to see, Joe Gibbs Racing get 1, 2, and 3 just shows again how dominant these Toyotas are right now. And I did feel bad for Kyle Larson a little bit because it was only like 2-3 laps left when he blew a tire. But, this was an interesting race, guys. I mean, with the temperatures that those rotors are going through, dropping down to about 600 degrees, then all the way up to 1,000, back and forth and back and forth. We saw a lot more cautions than I thought we were going to see this last race. I mean, rotors were exploding left and right. And I know we'll get into some of those unfortunate incidents. But I loved watching the rotors glow. It's one of the things I love about the night racing. But a really unfortunate finish for 10 drivers getting DNFs on this one. There were way more cautions than I thought. Sky, I'm sure, you picked up on some of them too. But a few fans actually got hurt when I think it was when Ross Chastain or it might have been Tyler Reddick when they blew. A few fans had to go to the hospital over that, which was really unfortunate. But, overall, I thought it was a really good race.
I did not catch that about the fans. So prayers to them and their recovery. That's unfortunate to hear. I mean, it was definitely a difficult race for a lot of drivers. There's a lot of brake issues. I did want to talk about the Denny restart. To me, I almost wondered if it was, and this is total speculation on my end, if it was just intentional. I know that he's been kind of hanging around the back anyway during a lot of these races. It's just the way that it happened was so rookie, like so obvious that you jumped it, but it's also Denny Hamlin. Who knows? Maybe he just wanted to make it a little harder for himself, a little more challenging. But good on him for winning. And at the 54, I mean, we mentioned the 1-2-3 finish, but he finished 13th. So I think Joe Gibbs is definitely very happy this weekend overall. I think I'm most sad for AJ Allmendinger. I mean, he was doing so well. You don't usually see him. I think that was one of the first stage wins on an oval in the Cup Series for him. Stage 1, I think he won there. He was doing so well. So it's unfortunate that his day ended with with that brake issue.
Yeah, those brakes became a problem early. I think they showed Hocevar around lap 30 of this race glowing red. And you could just tell with this extra horsepower, and this new package that the setups weren't quite prepared for these rotors. And then I think drivers had to adjust the more that we lost. I mean, you could see him almost pulling the Ross Chastain, the Hail Melon going up into the fence to try and soften the blow. But this is going to be a problem when we get to St. Louis. We saw brake issues at St. Louis last year, and they're really going to have to take a look at the SMT data on this and what they can do to keep these brakes cool and you know the calipers and the brake pressure that they're putting on, because I mean these things weren't just breaking, they were like shattering, just completely blown to pieces. So that was, you know, like Jeff mentioned, concerning for the fans, and that becomes a safety issue, and also for the driver. I mean, you go down into the corner and blow a brake rotor, there were some hard licks for sure from that. So honorable mentions though, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., nice top five there. And how about old SVG leading 12 laps, finishing P5? I'm telling you what, guys, SVG, we said it earlier this season, he will win on an oval this year.
Just a matter of time, you guys. He's been kicking ass. Obviously, he's done a lot of work in the simulators and during the off season, because it really has shown. I mean, he really has surprised me. And we were talking about it towards the end of last season. We're like, hey, we know what he can do on the road courses, but with this new format, he's going to have to get some really good finishing on ovals and win one or two maybe. But he's pumping up there. So yeah, I was thoroughly impressed with him. It was great. And then the other driver that I was really wondering, who I like to see up there was actually Zane Smith. I thought it was pretty damn cool that he led 18 laps. We don't normally see him up there a whole heck of a lot. So to see him where he was for the majority of that race and actually running pretty damn well was really cool. So props to Zane Smith. I think he's only led like 41 laps and I don't know 93 starts, and he's led 47 laps in just the last two races, something right around there. But he was really giving it a go too. So I thought that was pretty cool. But back to this rotor thing. I mean, we saw the air intake on the front of each side of the car. Some drivers had larger ones than others. We actually saw tape over some so that we could keep a little more heat in the engine. It wound up causing a lot of problems. And we see a lot of places like the super speedways where they've actually taken away a lot of the stands up front because of incidences that we've seen where cars have actually gone into the catch fence. Now, are we going to see that happening on some of these other tracks? I'm not quite sure, but like Kevin, you mentioned that's also a safety issue for the drivers themselves. There was one fan that said a piece hit his wife and had to take her to the hospital. She was, nothing severe, but she was bleeding. So she went to the medical tent, and then a couple, like you said, it was off the Ross Chastain incident, is what they were thinking. But I think people on TV forget how dangerous racing really is, especially when you're sitting up there in the front. So not just the drivers themselves, but the fans, because we've seen that happen a long time ago when Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski, I think that was at Talladega, when they got into it, and there were chunks that actually flew through, and people did go to the hospital on that one. So do they remove some stands? Do they change the horsepower back a little bit to where it's going to affect the passing? We've been wanting to see this extra horsepower, and I think we're seeing damn good racing out of it compared to what we saw last year on the 1.3 and the 1.5 mile tracks, these intermediate tracks. But when you've got a brake rotor that weighs 30 pounds. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I remember as a kid, I'd boil up some water and I'd drop a marble in there, and it would all, hopefully it would crackle up and not disintegrate, but I just wanted to see those cracks in there. That's exactly the same thing we're seeing that's happening to these rotors. You're taking something that's going from that cool to that hot, and they explode. So again, NASCAR is probably going to have to look at something to do with that. I don't know if maybe they'll change the designs on the cars a little bit, so we do have a little bit more airflow that goes into the braking system, because like Kevin was mentioning, it can melt down a lot of different things between the calipers and even just the beads on the tires themselves, and see tires go down. I don't know if that's what happened with Kyle Larson or not. He was one of the only guys that actually had the tire go down versus the broke rotors just exploding. So it's really weird to see this many cautions at Nashville. Like I said, I did not expect to see 10 cars with DNFs.
It was definitely, there's so many weird instances. I think that there could be some, NASCAR definitely needs to look into it. But then you think of SVG, his two other teammates had complete Rotor failure. I mean, they blew up. They were out of the race. We seen Ross Chastain on pit road. He was very unhappy, which I do feel for him because I do think that he probably had a fast car. I mean, I know he likes Nashville. He performs well at Nashville, so I'm sure he was very upset there. But SVG, I mean, he finished fifth. His car made it. And I remember during the race, his crew chief was SVG was getting worried and about it. Like he was stressing that he was worried about it. And his crew chief was like, you know what, we had something completely different than them. So maybe there's other ways to work around it as well. I'm sure the teams will talk and the drivers and they'll look at each other's data. Maybe they can figure out something different. So maybe it's not as bad elsewhere or when we come back again, because I do think ultimately the horsepower switch is good, and I don't want NASCAR to keep swinging it back and forth, and it'll be just too much doing all that.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. This horsepower is made for some of the best racing we've had in years, and getting closer and closer to getting this Gen 7 where we want it. I mean, Nashville, it's really kind of come into its own for the Cup Series. I wasn't too sure when we first started going there. It's always been kind of a, O'Reilly truck track, but I've been thoroughly impressed with the racing at Nashville. I just think we need to get a few things dialed in for sure. I mean, we're downshifting into the corner, a lot of brake. It's really a driver's track, and I think that's where SVG is starting to dial in on some of these more technical ovals, if you will. And I expect the same when we get to St. Louis and then New Hampshire later this summer. I feel like that's going to start kind of feeding into his driving style. We see how good he is at braking on road courses. That's what gives him that advantage, and that carryover is definitely coming to the ovals. So whatever they're doing on that 97 car, it's working, and SVG is getting more confidence every single week when we show up. But overall, other than that late start, I mean, I give this one of the better races of the year. I mean, we also have to remember, what was it, 2 years ago when we had 5 overtimes, here at Nashville. So, I mean, it's definitely known to create some chaos and create some cautions and some good racing. And I'm glad that NASCAR Cup Series is still going there. I mean, do we look at moving it back a little bit to where it's a little bit cooler?
Well, it's really tough because this time of year, almost all the tracks are really hot. It just the heat gets up there, the humidity gets up there. I do like that they had it in the evening time, which definitely helped. The rain, I know, cooled it off quite a bit during practice. We didn't get to see qualifying on this one because we had the O'Reilly series to get out on the track. But like you guys are saying, with SVG, Sky, you mentioned it. I heard his crew chief telling him too. He's like, we have a different setup in our brake system than our other 2 cars, so don't worry about it. The other thing I heard SVG say after the race, and I can't remember if it was something I saw online or if it was actually in the post-race interviews that really cracked me up, where he was talking about strategy. And he's like, when you're running in clean air versus dirty air, I mean, it's great when you're running clean air, but when you have to start back in the back, the car's just a bucket of shit. And when he said it just bluntly like that, I just started laughing. I think he's got a great sense of humor. I love his interviews. He's just straight and to the point. But overall, like you guys said, I don't think we need to change that horsepower because this is some of the best racing we've seen in quite a few years. But again, Joe Gibbs Racing, man, the last time they finished in a 1-2-3 situation was in Richmond, and that was in September of 21. And Denny Hamlin, he's just knocking on that door for tying Kyle Busch, like you mentioned, Kevin, with the in 9th place on the win list. And I think he's going to do it. We're talking about, he's given a little bit of hinting that this might be his last full season of racing with Joe Gibbs. But I know even before, Kyle passed, he said that he wanted to make sure that he beat him on that list. And this year, I think he's going to do it regardless. So if we see him retire, I'm not sure. I know he'll definitely run some races with 2311 and with the sense that he owns the team, him and Michael Jordan. He'll do some part-time racing, but will he maybe do a 1-year extension? Because he does have the sponsors to do it. I mean, he's got some of the best sponsors that are just feeding that team money, and that's really what makes a team,
For sure. And Denny he has raw talent. I think he's gotten better later in his career. The time that he spends in the sim, it just shows up at the track, like Sky was saying, let me just go to the back and see if I can't drive through the field, almost like a video game type move, right? So whatever they're doing, it's working. But if Denny does win this championship this year, that would be one hell of a way to go out, right? Retire on top, come back, run some races with 2311. That'd be a great way to go. So, one thing's for sure, he's headed to a track where he won a year ago, and Reddick won 2 years ago. So our 1 and 2 in points are headed to a track where they both won our last 2 visits. So that's something to keep in mind. But Sky, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the 22. I know you'd picked Joey to win this race. Obviously didn't get the best track position. We haven't qualified, in weeks because of Mother Nature, but bringing home P14, Ryan Blaney P8, are the Penske Fords getting better, or is there still panic in that 22 camp?
I definitely feel like there should still be, I don't know about panic, but you should definitely be a little bit concerned. I think all of Penske, honestly, the only reason I even said that for the 12 is just because it's like hit or miss with his pit crew. I was thinking about this earlier. It's interesting. I feel like it's like one car can only have a good day. When it was like Blaney and Logano were having a bad few weeks there, and Cindric was doing so good, but then the last 2 weeks, Cindric's been involved in these wrecks, and the other drivers, have been a little bit better. I mean, Blaney got a top 10 here, but I do think that at this point in the season, especially for Logano being 18th, I do think that there's a little bit of concern. I don't know about full blown panic yet, but definitely some concern.
Yeah, I think Penske's got a little bit to work on, and I think Chevy does as well. As we know, like I said, Toyota has got it going on across the board. Kind of like you're mentioning, it seems like Ryan Blaney seems to kind of perform the best out there. With Hendrick Motorsports this weekend. Alex Bowman had a rotor blow up. Kyle Larson, like I mentioned, had a tire blow. So Bowman finished with P33, and I was actually a little disappointed with William Byron because he was doing really well for the first half of that race, and then it just didn't work out for him. So to only see Chase Elliott finishing in P5, he's the only one that was in the top five. Much less, like I said, Larson getting to 23 was his second best finish. And we're seeing a lot of that with Hendrick. We seem to see Elliott and Larson kind of up there in that top 10, one of the two. But kind of like Penske, the rest of the drivers just seem like they're finishing 20th place or below. And we're just not used to seeing that out of those two organizations. So, 2311 and Joe Gibbs, any of those Toyota affiliates, they're just crushing it. So I think that both of the Hendrick camp and the Penske camp do have a lot of work to do, Kevin. So, it's in this next gen car, we've been seeing a lot of drivers come up that we're not used to seeing. I mean, I thought it was really cool to see Ricky Stenhouse get a P4 out of there. And, like I said, Zane Smith got a top 10 with his P9. And Hocevar actually did pretty damn good. It's the last race he's doing the Chili's sponsorship for this year. And I know he wanted to give them a good showing. So it's nice that he got that top 10.
Ride the dente, as they say. Yeah, and Hocevar, I guess Buscher wasn't real happy with him. There was a couple tempers flaring, so I guess we can just kind of segue into that. Your guys' thoughts on the Brad Keselowski, Austin Dillon incident? I mean, I saw a couple different angles of it. I heard Austin Dillon's in-car. I have not seen the SMT data. I believe Letarte and Dale Jr. both said it didn't look intentional, but BK sat there on Prime and said, I just saw the replay. It was 100% intentional. Sky, I don't think it was.
If you show the clip and present it both ways, I think you can make arguments for both. On the Dale Jr. and they were all saying, oh, he lifts before he makes contact with the six. And it's like, yeah, he does, but it's like a split second. It's like super, it's like, I don't know. And it does look like he chases him down there. Maybe it wasn't like, I'm going to wreck you type thing, but maybe it was like, hey, like, I want you to know I'm here. I'm all over you. And maybe it just kind of went too far and it caused a wreck. Maybe the three was just trying to make himself known to the six, kind of like he was upset. I don't know. I feel like you could literally make an argument for both ways. I don't know if I would fully co-sign and say that it was intentional, though. Like, I don't think that he deserves a penalty or anything for it.
Yeah, absolutely not. I'm leaning more towards it was just racing. It's kind of hard when you guys have just like a split second to make that decision. The three did lift a little bit. Yes, did he get back into the back of the six? But he didn't really have any room to go. I mean, any further to the left, he would have been in the grass. Any further to the right, he would have been running into the guy next to him. So it was an unfortunate incident. I definitely don't think it was intentional. Even if he was giving him just a little bit of a nudge, which again, I'm kind of leaning towards it was just a racing incident because we see things like this happen quite often, especially when you're that close. You're trying to avoid wrecks. And unfortunately, it just caught up a lot of guys. Cole Custer got caught up in it. Corey Hunt got caught up in it. Michael McDowell. it was just just a shitty incident to happen. But I'm not putting any blame on the 3 car, in my opinion. I know Brad was heated, but these guys always get heated no matter whether it's their fault or not. I guess, like Kevin said last week about someone's like, I guess it depends on what t-shirt you're wearing in the stands or whose shirt you bought, at the haulers. Then you can kind of say who you think was at fault. But to me, again, I think it was just racing, guys.
Yeah, that's kind of my final analysis on it. There was some chaos happening at the start finish line, and it looked like Brad had slowed up quicker than Dillon did. And the spotter was saying, go
Yeah.
low, go low, go low. And when he went low, Brad was already slowed up, and he just basically plowed into the back of him. But I don't think he stood in it. He didn't mash the gas into the back of the six. But I mean, you talk to the Keselowski camp, they're going to tell you 100% this is what happened here and there. But I haven't seen the SMT data. I don't know if that's going to prove that it was intentional or not. We may never know, right? Because we're at that point where if they say they're going to do it on the radio, they get penalized. But if there's no verbal confirmation that yeah, I'm going to wreck him or yeah, I did, then you're probably not going to get penalized. Definitely no penalty worthy in this scenario, Sky.
No matter what, intentional or not, I don't think it was intent. It's so hard to tell because these drivers, they're going to be sneaky about what they do. But I do think that probably Keselowski was just upset. I mean, Brad, it's been doing well this season, but he needs all those good runs that he can get. So I'm sure he wasn't too happy to have his day ended like that. And I'm sure the 2 of Cindric was definitely not happy to have his day ended like that either. We didn't touch on the ending wreck. Oh my gosh, the 45 getting turned straight into the wall. I mean, that definitely wasn't intentional either. I don't think.
Hard hit.
Just a little bit of chaos. Yeah, it was hard. It was horrible. I'm glad to see that he got out of the car, but I'm sure Blaney was definitely like, oh, when he's seen the 45 get turned up for sure.
Yeah, that was rough. I'm glad you brought that up because, and fortunately, it was right at the start finish line and right after that. So it didn't really cause anyone any position, as far as like it did with some of the other drivers in other wrecks. But yeah, that lick that he took into the wall, it was hard. I mean, that front of the car was just totally smashed in. Chase Elliott sitting there, just smoking on all 4 tires. And but yeah, the 45, man, I'm sure he felt it. Probably still feeling it today and maybe even tomorrow. That's a tough one to take, without having to feel anything at all. So, very very unfortunate for the cars to get torn up. It's a lot of money that these guys spend in the organizations to put these cars on the track. And the 45, his car's it's toast. So he's going to have to go to a whole new setup for next week. But since it's Michigan, we're going to be going for a different setup anyway. But kind of going back to SVG, I'm really excited to see what he can do on this 2 mile track. I'm looking at what he's been doing so far, and especially after this weekend on a 1.3 mile track, what he can do on a full, just straight D oval circle, oval, and 2 miles. This is going to be one of those tracks where I think drivers are going to get spread out a little bit. There's going to be a little bit of drafting, which I'm going to like to see. It's obviously our only 2 mile track that's an oval on the circuit anymore since Fontana was taken out a few years back. But I'm really excited to see what he can do, and I'm also want to see what Connor Zilic can do because he's been such a really good showing so far this year, and he's got such talent. He's so young. There's a lot of drivers that I can't wait to see go out there and race some of these veterans. But kind of like Kevin mentioned earlier, guess who won this race last year? Denny Hamlin. Is he going to go back to back? There's a very, very good possibility. I mean, we were just saying it. He's 45 years old, and it seems like right now he's in his prime. It's like most guys that are 45, I think it was like Mark Martin that even said it on the broadcast yesterday, that usually at 45 you're starting to kind of get faded out in the sport, but not Denny. He's full on extent, Kevin.
Yeah, he is for sure. Performing at an elite level and going to a place where he's had success, just a year ago. So, Michigan totally different than where we've been. I mean, you can't really compare the mile and a half, the 1.3 intermediates, the short tracks. It's a wide open racetrack. A lot less braking there with how banked the corners are, carrying a lot of speed through there. So, long run speed is going to be crucial for sure when we get to Michigan. You had mentioned Connor Zilic. He's really coming into his own. I don't know if you guys caught the O'Reilly Auto Parts race, but he was guest commentating up in the booth for CW. I thought he did a fantastic job. Interesting race. I don't know if you guys had a chance to see it. Cletus McFarland ran it. Did not have the finish he was looking for.
I did end up catching that race, and I don't know, did you hear everything about Justin Allgaier? I mean, he said he was going to retire. Now he's not retiring. I mean, he's also just the same as Denny Hamlin in my eyes. You know, the older they get, the better they get. But before I get into all that, I wanted to mention something about Connor Sillich because I noticed this today when I was writing my notes for the episode. I always like to write the standings, and I like to keep an update on who's falling and what's going on. We know how the 48 missed how many races? It's 6 at the beginning of the season. Bowman now has 13 more points than Zillage, even with missing those races. And obviously, that's not too much on Zillage. He's a rookie. I mean, a lot of the instances in the wrecks and stuff that he's been caught up in aren't even his fault. But that's got to be tough on him for sure.
I'm sure it is, but when you've got that Hendrick dominance and all the resources that they have, that's really helped Alex Bowman. I was kind of surprised that they pulled him from the O'Reilly race and had Kyle Larson run that car instead. I didn't hear any reasoning why. Did either of you guys catch any reason, or is just a switch? I mean, was he starting to feel bad again?
I didn't hear any official confirmation from HMS or any of those guys or JR Motorsports as to why they switched him.
Yeah, I didn't either. So I was just kind of wondering why they did switch him. So, but like Sky was saying, it's Connor Zilic. He's a rookie, so he's had some ups and downs, but we know he's a damn good driver. But she's right. To see Alex Bowman missing 6 races and then come back and is up beating him in points, just I think a lot of that has to do with just Hendrick as an organization overall, and like I said, all the resources they have. They all share so much data. Um, I know we were talking, with Lauren a few weeks back about Ricky Stenhouse, and Hayek. It's like they're a little bit of an affiliate, obviously, with Hendrick Motorsports, but they don't share as much data as those 4 teams that Hendrick do with some of these kind of smaller satellite teams. It's good to be affiliated with them and get a lot of their equipment and stuff like that, but they're definitely not sharing as much information as they do amongst themselves.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, it's a satellite team. There's resources available, of course, but I mean, again, great finish for Ricky. I think we mentioned that was a great weekend for them and something to build on for sure. Ricky's got talent, and it shows on some of these racetracks. But yeah, I mean, looking at those points here, Connor Zilic 34th in points, 2 DNFs. It's not been a great go of it for his rookie season, but I think that's just part of the growing pains and trying to figure out what this next Gen 7 is going to do for him. He was so used to running the O'Reilly Auto Parts race, and that's kind of where he figured out his NASCAR. Now you throw him up into the Cup level, it's going to take him a little bit, right? And I think they're going to continue to improve, and he's got great teammates around him. So I still think he could probably get Jeff a top 25 points finish this season, if not better, as we start, coming back to tracks for a second time and so on and so forth.
Yeah, he probably will, and he's just going to get better. Like I said, he's so young. But a minute ago, Sky, you're kind of talking about Bubba Wallace and how he's kind of coming up a little bit as far as the older he's getting a little bit better. But he's had quite a few DNFs, and it seems like to me over the last few races, he's starting to play the victim card again, in my opinion. It's like, he gets caught up in something and nothing's ever his fault. I saw him talking to Alex Bowman after the race, but even before that, he got into it with Carson Hocevar and Chris Buescher on the track in an incident, but then Alex Bowman winds up ending Wallace's day. And I know he was frustrated with him, but from the interview I read this afternoon or some comments that Bubba had made, he just said it's frustrating because he seems to find himself in all these situations, but it's pretty much never his fault. And I think, when you're a driver, sometimes you're putting yourself in that situation. I mean, a lot of it, obviously, you cannot control, but if there's a common denominator and you keep getting caught up and having too many DNFs in this year, you might look at your own driving.
I do think that it's like he can't have a normal bad day because when he does,
Right.
then you get like flooded. Well, he gets flooded on social media with a lot of excess hate that especially by people who don't even really watch the sport, who really only watch to see if he does bad and stuff. So I get that he probably is just really frustrated with being caught up in these instances, but I do think that you do have a point where, if you're constantly in the back and you're constantly around these people and, you're doing all these things that aren't helping you. So like on pit road, messing up on pit road or, doing all these things, not having the car set up the right way, not being on the same page as all the other members of your team. You can end up in scenarios more often that lead to like these wrecks. I can't say that I fully hate the guy for, being frustrated, because when you're caught up so many times and stuff that has nothing to do with you, I mean, any person is going to get fed up with that.
Absolutely. And look, the 23 fired off with a lot of speed early this year. We know his teammate has won 5 races. I mean, he's in good equipment. When we look, I mean, he's had 3 DNFs. He's led 89 laps, which is more than we can say for William Byron, or even Carson Hocevar, who won Talladega. So there's definitely, I wouldn't say complete panic for the 23, but as I always say in racing, I like to steal this term from John Forrest. When you get snake bit, you kind of just get trapped into it, and it puts you in a bad mind space. And I think that's where Bubba is. We've seen him get this way in the past for sure. But I do think that the 23, especially when we can get back to qualifying, right? Better track position. That's typically when we see the 23 run a little bit better, when they can kind of be in control of their day. So, we'll see what happens when we get here to Michigan, if these guys can turn it around, find some speed, qualify well, run up front, collect some stage points, because like Sky was mentioning, he's definitely one of the biggest losers in points. We watched him slip just slowly, just keep sliding down. Next thing you know, he's going to be out of the chase. So, and these races are clicking off. We're coming up on race 15, which means we're only 11 away from the chase, Jeff.
Yeah, and it's crazy because he did start off really well this season. He was up there in points. I mean, wasn't he in like third position for the first few races of the year? And then he's just kind of slowly dropped off. And so I don't hate the guy at all. I think he's a great driver. He's got a lot of talent. He does have personality, and it's unfortunate that fans will dog him on his social media. But again, that's social media, and I don't think he pays too much attention to that. I think he's matured a little bit since he's had a child now, which a lot of these drivers kind of do fall into those same kind of scenarios once they have a kid. But just like SVG was saying about that race, you get back there in dirty air and you're driving a bucket of shit. So it's hard when you're in dirty air to really be able to perform at your peak performance. So Kevin, like you mentioned, once we get back to getting some qualifying in there and, be able to put yourself in that good position and keep it up, I think he's going to do a lot better.
Yeah, well, I agree. And we're going to Michigan. He finished P4 here last year. So, again, I think the Toyotas are going to be favored going into this weekend for obvious reasons until Hendrick can get their shit together. I don't think they're going to be the favorites that we're used to. So, crunching these numbers, I guess I'll make my pick for this weekend. I'm going bold. I'm going RFK Racing. Chris Buescher goes to victory lane here in Michigan.
Chris Buescher's a really good pick. I mean, RFK has been they've had a little bit of a slump recently, but they've been doing so well this season. I mean, they were the only team for a long time to have all of their drivers in the chase. My pick, it's so funny. My pick, I hands down picked this before this episode even started, but it was a really good segue. I chose Bubba Wallace to win Michigan. I think that, he's really frustrated. He made that show on, his in his media, what is it, medical center interview, that he's frustrated and they got to figure it out, and they got to figure out how to start winning and how to stay consistent. And I think that it starts in Michigan.
That's a good pick, Sky, because Bubba seems to do really well on these larger tracks. And I know it's not a super speedway, but a 2 mile track. He finished P4 there last year. So, but Kevin, you actually took my pick. I was going to take Chris Buescher for this one. So now I'm kind of like up in the air. I'm like getting ready to flip a coin. But before I make that decision, last year, who took P8 was the number 8 of Kyle Busch. And that's one thing I was looking at when I saw the results from last year. It just kind of made me go, oh man, he finished P8 in Michigan. I know every lap 8 we've been seeing people go silent for that lap, and it's really cool to see. So heck, I don't know. I want to go with Kyle Larson, but I'm not seeing the speed out of Hendrick. I'm gonna go with Denny Hamlin. Say he goes back to back from Nashville and winning it last year, guys.
Yeah, really good pick, Jeff. I mean, Denny, when he gets hot, he's on the move, right? He won the All-Star race, comes up here and wins in Nashville, going back to a track he's won at. Denny was a good pick. I wanted to take Denny, but I've picked him so many times this year that I think it's time that we get a Ford up there. We get an RFK Ford in Victory Lane. Look, it's Brad Keselowski's home track, right? He's up there from Rochester Hills, Michigan. So RFK wants to show up. They want to show out. It's going to be a great race weekend. Definitely looking forward to Michigan up there. It's time to shut her down. We're on to Michigan. Let's hope that Mother Nature can cooperate this weekend. Let's get the race in on time. Let's get qualifying in. I know we're at that time of year where there's thunderstorms and all kinds of chaos across the country. So hopefully we get some good weather this weekend. We'll be back next Monday night to break down all of the action from the Firekeepers Casino 400 up there in Michigan. And until then, y'all,
Mash the gas.